So, little known fact, one of the first games I ever remembered playing was The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. See, my older brother had a save, and he was so far into the game that he had access to Adult Link. I spent months running around, however, on his save as Young Link, exploring the fun and brightly lit world. It was so great, and then I did this.
I had taken the Master Sword and turned into Adult Link. It blew my little mind. I had the Master Sword, there was nothing anybody could do to me. I was invincible, and oh my god, what happened to the world? Why is the sky like that? Why is everything dead? Why is... oh fuck!
How could something in a game be so scary? Games are supposed to be fun and awesome. Why did the devs decide they wanted to terrorize a young 4-year-old me? It had not made sense. I was so young, I hadn't even seen a scary movie at that point in my life. The scariest thing I had ever seen was Littlefoot's mom fighting the T-Rex in Land Before Time. Horror was completely foreign to me, and I was hooked. That experience set me on the course to a lifelong love of horror. I love being scared, and that love, 21 years later, has not gone away. I began to play more and more games as I got older. That would scare the utter living hell out of me. I remember playing just the opening 15 minutes of the game and would go. That scared me so much, I could only keep replaying the first 15 minutes of it and making it maybe a few feet farther. This love didn't just extend to video games, but all mediums of art. I loved watching scary movies with my mom. It became and remained my favorite genre of film.
However, horror is a mystery to me. How do you make something that is meant to elicit a negative emotion like fear, but retain the audience and even get them coming back for more? If something is too scary, you risk losing your audience. If it's not scary enough, you risk boring them. Horror, more than any other genre, relies on having a perfect rhythm, building up to great big scares and giving your audience enough time to return to a semblance of normal. To give an example of this, you can look at James Wan's The Conjuring. Wan is a master of building the story at a safe and steady pace. Then he slams you with some of the biggest scares in the genre. This is ultimately how horror is written. You slowly take the audience from a sense of safety into them questioning if they were ever safe to begin with. Like a frog in a pot of water, if you slowly bring the heat up, it'll boil alive before ever realizing that it was in danger. Now do that several times over as the course of the story continues, with the base level of safety becoming further and further away till you reach the climax of the story. Doing this in a movie setting where you entirely control the pace at which the story is told is a lot easier. It's still hard, but it's easier than a video game. How do you control the pace when the player has agency over the pace of the game they are playing? If I'm Isaac Clarke in Dead Space, the game could never scare me if I never leave the starting ship. Or if I'm Rachel in the mortuary's assistant, I could just not come back to work after my training shift. The player has all control over the pace, and that can make for a complete lack of rhythm in storytelling. How well do the scares work if they are experienced too far apart, or if the player just splits through the game, not allowing for tension to build? This is solved in multiple ways. In procedurally generated games like the Mortuary's Assistant, it creates a cadence and rhythm through the player's own actions. Its scares are directly tied to the player's actions, specifically where they look, where they go, and the speed at which they clear their objectives. The way the game forces the player into engaging with the game and the scares is through the threat of a timer. This hidden timer is the only reason why Mortuary's Assistant works, as there is a pressure on the player to perform their tasks in time. If the player is too slow in figuring out what body the demon is possessing, then they will lose and be possessed themselves. This hidden timer is only barely told by scribbling blindly on a sticky note. The looseness of the system behind the game is what creates its sickening, horror-filled atmosphere. Nowhere is safe in the mortuary's assistant, and the tension rises steadily throughout each shift. As the longer into the night, the frequency of the scares increases steadily, faster and faster. All comes together as one of the scariest games in recent memory. However, what about games that don't control the rhythm of the game through a timer? While Left 4 Dead is not a traditional horror game, there is nothing scarier than the sound of a tank or a witch gracing your presence. So, how does this work? Left 4 Dead created a, at the time, one-of-a-kind internal program called the AI Director. The AI Director was an omnipresent piece of programming that handled the balance of the game. If the players were breezing through the zombie game, then the director would then in real time ramp up the difficulty, adding more hordes, special zombies, boss zombies like the tank or the witch, removing ammo and health drops, and if the players were getting too badly stomped, the director would ease off and give more health items, less zombies, and less specials. The director mixed itself with forced set pieces that had a more static amount of difficulty in real time. So while certain spots will always have specific zombies show up, the AI director could adjust minor things about these set pieces, and have full reign to adjust the in-between moments of these more structured set pieces.
Now, why when talking about horror would I bring up something like Left 4 Dead's AI director? While an impressive piece of technology made all the way back in 2006, it's not a horror game and not very scary, save for a fear of a difficulty tweak. Because since then, people have modified the idea of an omnipresent director changing the difficulty of a game in real time, and they have done so in an incredibly terrifying way.
Alien Isolation takes the idea of an omnipresent director and mixes it with the secondary AI that only knows what it sees and hears. The AI director in Alien Isolation gives hints to the alien, allowing it to hunt more effectively. This stops the alien from wandering too far from the player and getting lost. The AI director constantly placing the alien nearby the player so that the player is forced to play around the alien. The threat constant. The player's safety always in doubt save for a few story beats where the alien is simply not around. The system gets more complex, however, as the alien's AI isn't static. It learns through a process called AI trees. Think of all actions the alien can take as a web of nodes. If the player uses vents or lockers as a way to avoid the alien, eventually the AI director will unlock the node for the alien to start checking vents and lockers. After enough interactions, this gives the player the feeling that the alien is getting progressively smarter as the game goes on. On top of this, specific nodes are forced open as the game reaches certain points in the story. This way, the difficulty of the game has an appropriate difficulty curve. The director and the alien come together through this to create a living and breathing creature.
So, this shows that even without an actual ticking clock, the player is forced to react to the game's internal pace, lest they suffer an agonizing death. However, what about the games that don't scare you with a specific threat, but instead use the environment and atmosphere to create fear?
Well, let's look at movies first. There are a large number of movies that create the tension of the film through their set design, camera work, and audio design. Nothing is blatantly threatening or scary, but something's off. There is no safety. Let's take an example of a typical haunted house. Going back to The Conjuring, there is nothing actually wrong with the houses and sets in the film, but everything feels so cramped. Like there's no room to breathe. Hallways and staircases seem to stretch far longer than they should, but at the same time as you travel them, they feel smaller and smaller. Rooms feel so small and crowded, you wonder how you could ever relax. The lighting casts heavy shadows that makes the viewer feel scared of what they aren't seeing. What's in the dark? And is it looking back at me? PT understands this more than anyone. Hideo Kojima was set to work on a new Silent Hill game. The game was going to be called Silent Hills. However, nobody knew about this till Kojima told us with the release of PT, the playable test. The game features quite possibly the creepiest hallway in gaming. All the player does is explore the very limited environment till the door at the hallway is opened and they are allowed to move on into the very same hallway, with minor differences. There is no gameplay beyond simply walking around and looking at things, no combat, no bosses, no clear goals, beyond simply getting out of the house. No enemies either. Well, unless you count Lisa. The list of actual characters in the game is super small, Lisa being one of them. This decrepit, sickly, demonic-looking woman haunts you as you play. I briefly mentioned how fear is created when the viewer has information withheld from them. That is utilized here with the little-known fact that Lisa is at all times directly behind the player. This is never revealed to the player. The only way a player could guess this is through the various hints throughout the short demo that warns the player of looking behind them, that she is behind you. Lisa is not the only thing that scares the player though. It's the design of the hallway. It's long, like absurdly long. It stretches and then wraps around into a right angle into another obscenely long hallway. It's also cramped. Most parts of the hallway feeling like if you stood in the middle, you could stretch your arms out and touch both walls. There are only 3 locations in the house: the creepy gray-walled room you wake up in, the hallway, and the bathroom. The 3rd location creates a space for the players to feel trapped, with no way out. How could you feel safe when you're stuck in a room with only one door in or out, and there is something on the other side of it trying to get in, trying to get you? The environment was created to practically swallow you whole. The indie game Anatomy says it best.
Have you not been paying attention? Did it not occur to you that as an organism existing within a greater organism, your intrusion would be felt? And still you harassed. And now, like the wayward spider who witlessly settles upon a sweeper's tongue, you will be swallowed. Because the truth is this: when a house is both hungry and awake, every room becomes a mouth.
However, the thing that helps PT the most is that it's linear in its objective. Because of the way the game is designed, it doesn't matter if the player completes the game in 50 minutes like it normally takes, or 2 hours. The player will go through the exact same scares in the intended ways. Lisa doesn't shut the bathroom door unless you peek into the bathroom. Lisa doesn't attack you unless you break the rules. The rooms won't get all colorful and creepy unless you progress the game enough to get to them. A linear horror story is like a roller coaster. Every rise and fall, twist and loop, by design.
So that settles it, right? Horror works in games when the game forces the player into its rhythm somehow, whether it's through a timer, like the mortuary assistant, through an AI pushing you along by creating tangible threats like alien isolation, or through unnerving set design that is propped up by a very linear path to follow, like PT. Most horror games have one or more of these kinds of features. If you have all of these, you end up making a masterpiece like Silent Hill 2.
In my restless dreams, I see that town. Silent Hill.